Hello, everybody, and welcome to Getting Inside the Right Male Mind. I'm Lisa Shield.
And I'm Benjamin Shield.
And together we're the Shields. Two shields on a shingle, actually. That's the name of our corporation, right? All right. It is very, very nice to see all of you. And today we're going to talk about something extremely, extremely important: boundaries versus rules. So, babe, why don't you start by telling everybody what a boundary is?
Well, a boundary comes from personal values, and a boundary is really at the soul level of what a person needs to feel safe and have trust and safety on the planet, and how they can best be with someone without making their lives more narrow or leaving themselves too vulnerable. Can we start over?
Oh, put that down right there. See the red dot? Push it. Okay. All right. We'll just edit that out. So, a boundary is literally letting somebody know, this is where I stop and you start. These are my limits. It's like a country, right? You have a line that just says, here's the dividing line between you and me, right? And it's not good or bad or right or wrong. It's just, this is where these are my limits. These are the circle around me and around you. So what are rules?
Well, rules are somewhat arbitrary, and they often come from not from our soul, but from our head. And where it seems like boundaries would separate people, boundaries can actually be inviting, but rules can be separating. It can divide people and repel people.
Right. So a rule is something that's black and white, right or wrong, good or bad. And it's like, this is the way it is, right? So to give an example of a rule or a boundary might be, I don't feel comfortable becoming sexually intimate before we're in a committed relationship. That's just what works for me. So it isn't, a rule would be, it's wrong to have sex outside of a committed relationship or a marriage. So it's where you draw a black and white rule and it becomes divisive, right?
Right. And a rule it can be something that seems ordained, like, something that comes from outside of ourselves that we have to follow in order to be right, to be a good person or to be right. And a boundary is more from the soul level of what it is internally that I need to have a successful relationship.
So people really struggle with this, especially in dating, but I know, probably in relationships too. It's very, very challenging because I think often when we want to create a boundary, what we often do is we create a rule. We express our boundaries to people, but the way it comes across almost as if it were a rule. And I think very few people understand how to express a boundary to somebody. And so we wind up pushing people away. And especially when it comes to men, I think that men don't like rules. Right. Nobody does. Nobody wants to be told, it's my way or the highway.
And men often find that rules will make their lives more narrow rather than having a relationship make their lives more expansive.
Yeah. And I think that when you talk about a man feeling like rules will make his life more narrow, that comes down to a man's greatest fear, which is getting into a committed relationship or marriage and losing his personal freedom.
Yes, and living someone else's dream.
Yeah. And so this is a an important thing for women to know when they're expressing their boundaries to a man, that the way he hears it can often be, if I don't do what she says, then it's not going to work. If I want to be with her, I have to do it her way. And we were talking earlier before the broadcast, we were talking about how women will often use rules. They know that men want to be intimate, right? We know men want sexual intimacy. And so often what some women will do, and I will say guilty right here, that we want a man to prove all of these things to us before we're willing to go down that road. So it's almost like we have rules, or we have ways in which we try to get a man to jump through hoops to prove that he's a good guy, that he's not going to hurt us, that he's going to be monogamous. And so we have all of these rules that we lay out for men, thinking that if we can get you to jump through all these hoops, then you're going to be a good catch, or that you're going to be a good guy. Right. And then what happens is we have so many hoops and so many rules or tests that we put out there. And instead of just presenting them as boundaries, and we'll talk about how to do this in a minute in a healthy way, but instead of putting out there that these are my boundaries and then seeing if a man will honor and respect them, we want to get all this proof because we're so insecure and we've been hurt so many, or deceived so many times before, that what happens is we also start to disrespect a man because we feel like we can manipulate and control him.
Right. And rules are about control, where boundaries are about emotional vulnerability, to share what's deeply important to a person, as opposed to something that's arbitrarily controlling.
Right. So what I'm hearing you say is that a rule is rigid and black and white, and a boundary is like saying, look, can you do, like, this is who I am and this is what matters to me. Are you willing to respect these limits, my limitations, or as a human being, will you respect these limitations so that we can build something that works for both of us?
Right. And I'm not sure that men have the same rely on rules as much as a woman does in the dating world. A man is really trying to prove himself to be a good guy, to make the woman happy. And if there are strict rules, while he's trying to impress a woman, make her happy, prove that he's a good guy, the rules can shut him down. He could be doing everything he can. And someone might say, well, I'm not going to go out with you because you didn't give me 3 days notice. I'm insulted.
Right.
And he was just thinking he is being spontaneous. He knows that the woman he's courting likes spontaneity. And so it's difficult when someone is trying and there's no there. They just can't. It's almost like, even though rules are arbitrary and black and white, sometimes to a man it feels like it's a moving target.
Well, especially with women,
right?
Because it is.
Right. They think they're doing great, and then all of a sudden the floor drops out.
Yeah. Yep. I hear you. And it is so important that men and women meet in the middle, that we understand our similarities and we understand our differences, and we make room for that, because there's such a beautiful place in the middle where we can come together and both, get our needs met. beautifully. But I think boundaries are fundamental. And not rules. Rules push people away. They're divisive. They're black and white. And if somebody doesn't agree with your rules or feels that he's having to give up so much of himself to accommodate you. And I'm not saying, by the way, there are men who have rules. There are men who are super uptight.
Sure.
And have tons of rules. And I know stories of clients I had a client who was dating a guy and he was a neat freak, and she came into his house and she put her purse and her jacket on his countertop, and he had a conniption.
Oh, no.
Yeah, he had a fit, and she didn't feel welcome. She didn't feel at ease in his space. And he had so many rules, and she felt like she was tiptoeing around him. So I know it's not just women that do this, but it is by and large women who have dating rules. And we always go back, you and I, to the book, The Rules.
Right. Where women should be easy to be with and hard to get.
Oh, I wish it were only that simple. I don't think they ever get to the easy to be with part in the book. It's so manipulative. And you and I were talking, we were exploring another level of why we abhor this book so much this morning before our talk. And one of the things that we were looking at is how rules, and a book like The Rules, first of all, it's so sad because here are two women who were not love coaches, who were not therapists, who had no training whatsoever, sat down and wrote a book based on how their grandmothers dated, and this very antiquated old world thinking. And then they put a book out with the top publisher, and suddenly, just because it's written on a printed page and people are hungry for answers, this book became such a big deal, and so many women took it to heart and practiced it. The number of stories I have heard over the years from women who one of the rules is not to ever initiate or return a man's phone call. And I have heard story after story of women who are now with a guy who they didn't return his phone calls. The guy thought she wasn't interested and moved on. And then maybe they ran into each other at a party or something happened where their paths crossed again. And the woman said, the guy said, well, you never returned my phone call. And the woman said, well, I thought if you were interested, you would have called me. And the relationship didn't happen, and only happened out of circumstance that their paths crossed again because they were following these absurd rules. Yeah. I even know, of a beautiful story of a client who she was at a bar and she kept making eye contact with this guy, and he would look at her and she looked at him, but he never came over to her. And then she was leaving the bar, and as she was walking out, she just thought, I'm just going to turn around and say hello to this guy. And she went back, and it just turned out that he was super shy. And he wanted to come over to her, and he just was was a little bit more of a respectful, shy man. But it didn't mean that he wasn't interested, but somebody had to make the first move. So these rules are crazy. And what they do is, most rules are, a lot of these dating rules. I'm not talking about a personal, feeling around intimacy or when to have sexual connection or certain personal rules like boundaries. But dating rules like that book, they're all at the strategic level.
Right. Very cerebral. And, in the head and not in the heart, in the head and not in the soul.
Right. Yeah. And also another book like that is a book called Getting to I Do. And this is a very popular book The woman, the author, Pat Allen, spoke in Los Angeles weekly for years and years and years. And number one, she's one of the least feminine women I've ever seen in my life. She was a therapist, but her whole theory was getting women to a ring, like before you could really commit or think that. So women focused on getting a man to give them a ring rather than even finding out if it was really the right guy. And so many of the women I talked to who followed this path wound up with rings from guys that they ultimately, the guys were jerks. They followed her, prescription for getting the ring, but then the guy was such a jerk, they weren't even really interested. And there were rules. There were all these rules and guidelines to follow, and they worked on a personality level. If the guy wanted sex or he wanted to get the woman into bed, he would commit, but then he wasn't really committed. He was committed to getting sex, but not to the woman.
Yeah. And I think a quintessential example would be like the cover of a Cosmopolitan magazine, where it would just have article after article of 10 ways to get your man to say, to propose, or, all of these strategic formulas.
Right. And what happens is you have all these rules and men will chase you. They'll pursue you. You can get a guy to come after you, but is it really the man you want? And what's missing and why we have a, 50% divorce rate is because they're not connecting. The couple isn't connecting at the soul level. It's about getting a guy to pursue you and chase you and follow your rules and commit to you and get a commitment. I mean, I even think, look, it is important to see if a man is willing to commit before you have a sexual relationship, but that's not even a guarantee that two people are meant to be together.
Yeah. Our program talks about finding the guardian of your soul. And the guardian of the soul isn't about following rules. It's about seeing the path that soul needs to go on and support it in every way possible. And understanding the boundaries and respecting them, not being oppressed by rules. Respecting boundaries, but not being repressed by rules.
Well, and I even know on the rare occasion I took a certain tone of voice with you, you let me know. I remember once I said something to you about giving the dogs their medication when I was out of town. And you said to me, could you say that to me a little nicer? Because I must have said it like an order instead of a request. And you let me know immediately that wasn't okay, which was a great boundary on your part.
Yeah. And I didn't make you wrong.
No.
I just asked you for my own preference.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you didn't say that was nasty, or could you, you said, could you say that a little nicer? I knew that tone of voice wasn't going to work anymore. Yeah. But it's nice in that we can. So how do you express a boundary, honey? How do you do that?
Well, it's coming from personal preference. So instead of saying you should do this or you need to do that, it would be more like what's important to me and what would make me happy if you could, rather than should.
And it's more of an invitation.
Yes.
One of the things I always encourage with the women that do my program, our program, is I ask them at the end of a request to say, and what are your thoughts on that? So that a man has he has a choice. It's not like you're saying, this is what I want, this is how it has to be, but where you're saying, what are your thoughts on that? Is that something you feel that you could do for me? And so you're getting his buy-in, you're getting his yes or no, or I don't think I can do that, or that's not in my comfort zone. If I wanted you to text me more and I were to say to you, you know what, I love more connection between dates as I'm getting to know a man. Would it be possible for you to text me every other day, or, but at least have a little more contact in between our dates? And then you might say, I'm not much of a texter.
Right. And that's much better than saying, you need to text me in the morning and I need a text at night. And so a man feels that he has to check in.
Right.
It's like punching a clock. One loses a certain amount of heart in the relationship because it's something that, God, if I don't do it, I'm going to be in trouble.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a lot of what rules are. If I don't do it, I'm going to be in trouble. What boundaries are, if I respect the boundaries, I'm going to make her happy.
Mm-hmm.
So very different.
Yeah, and when it's made as a request. Well, something I think very few women really understand about men is that if you say something in the wrong way and you're telling a man what to do, whether or not he wants to do it, he's going to dig in his heels and say no or resist, just because he's not going to have you, lecture or talk to him like he's a little boy, or tell him what to do, boss him around. So a lot of men, even if a woman is right, or she's making, or she's telling him something and she's 100% right about it, if she doesn't do it in a way that's respectful, a man will just resist on principle. Thank you. But yeah, so guys will just resist on principle, even if a woman is right. And I think that is one of the hardest things for a woman to understand, because she thinks she's being very reasonable and very, rational about what she's saying. But then a guy is sitting there resisting, not because what she's saying isn't valid, but because of the way she's saying it.
Yeah. And I think that with the feminist movement, which has a lot of validity and we completely support, but there's a point where the feminist movement can lose femininity. And the femininity, sometimes the feminist movement can impose rules where the feminine is inviting and draws people in.
And I think you can still be a feminist and be feminine.
Oh, absolutely. I was just thinking back in the 70s, which is more my time, mm-hmm. where there were rules. And it was hard to feel that one can approach that person. And because there were... Can we pause?
No, because we're live.
Oh, okay.
Yes. No, but there were rules in the 70s. Well, what happened was everything kind of got turned upside down. Mm-hmm. We went from, you and I, well, in our generation, we went from our parents being very conservative and everything sort of being, the woman stayed at home, the man went to work, she had children. There were very defined roles. And then suddenly all of that got tossed up in the air, and men didn't know, do I open a door? Don't I open a door? They didn't know which end was up. And everything became, and it was a good thing in a way. And sometimes the pendulum has to swing in one direction. It has to.
Agreed.
It has to, in order for things to then come back to a new norm, because what was happening in the 50s and early 60s wasn't good either.
Right. Absolutely.
And the pendulum swinging back the other way again. Mm-hmm. We're going back into a more conservative time. So it's just interesting to see how this all kind of goes back and forth. But yeah, and there were rules. The rules that I think the most important thing to know is that rules are about right and wrong. They're about right and wrong, my way or the highway. And that's where I think we get into very dangerous territory in dating and in relationships. And it's about finding that middle ground. It's about being able to say, look, this is what works for me. This is what my truth is. And can you meet me there? I know with you and I, my goal with you is just to love you and make you feel safe and seen and heard in this relationship. I have so much respect for you. I mean, so much. And my ability to navigate your boundaries really does come from this incredible love and deep respect that I have for you, and this desire to make you feel seen in a way that I know other women haven't made you feel seen. So I wanted to share, yeah.
And I feel that. And that's why we've had 20 blissful years. And I don't say that with exaggeration. 20 blissful years.
Well, and hopefully we'll have 20 more.
At least.
I just want to sum up by saying, that the way to do this, and it is so important when you're stating a boundary, is to say, look, this is what I would love. This is what would make me happy, and I'd love to know your thoughts about that. Whether it's about, could you text me more? Could you let me know, a few days before a date that we're still on? Boundaries around sex, boundaries around children or family, or anything around your need for space and time alone or time together. Anytime you're setting a boundary, it's about making a request, making it inviting, and then saying to a man, could you please, would you be willing to? I'd love to know your thoughts. What do you think about this? So that it is not one person saying this is how it is and this is how it has to be, but where there's room for two people to have their own views and their own ideas about something, and then be able to feel seen and heard and come together and meet in the middle.
Beautiful.
Thank you. All right, everybody. This has been Getting Inside the Right Male Mind. I'm Lisa Shield.
And I'm Benjamin Shield.
And I'm so grateful to this man for coming on here on Sundays and being willing to share his beautiful self with all of you. It's one of the reasons why I created this podcast, because I feel that he is unique among men. And one of the great gifts that Benjamin gives to my women, to the women in my program, is that he writes the online dating profiles for the women who go through my course. He writes a shorter profile for the dating apps. What he can say in 300 characters is mind-blowing, and he writes longer profiles. In fact, today we got the most beautiful comment. What did the guy say, honey?
Is there any way to bring that up?
Oh, there was a beautiful, beautiful message from a man who, I wish I could find it. I know it's on my desktop, and I know that my desktop is not in the best shape right now. So it was quite an incredible testimonial from a man who, let me just see if I can bring this up quickly. Bear with me. Here we go. I know it's right here. Oh, there it is. Do you want to read it, babe?
Would you?
You want me to read it?
Please.
All right. So this was written by a gentleman to one of the women who did our program, and he wrote, "Hi, I don't know that we'd be a match. Think our worlds are somewhat different, but it's such a rare thing on here to read a thoughtful, well-written, heartfelt profile that I would like to reach out and compliment the author, you, or Benjamin in this case. I wish I had your gift for writing. I'm sure between that and your great pictures, you've got plenty of suitors on this silly site. And one more thing, I've got to find that Why Guys Are the Way They Are book. I've often wondered why I am the way I am. Best of luck to you. Be choosy. There really are some good ones out there amongst us." So that was one of the many phenomenal responses Benjamin's profiles get from the women, or from the men, I'm sorry, that the women in our course share with us. And most of the women who go through the program will say that, or the men will say that they fell in love with these women when they read her profiles. So we make a huge difference. Benjamin makes a huge difference in my clients' lives, and he's really a treasure. So thank you, baby, for coming on here. And I want to also tell you that we do a podcast. We do 2 weekly episodes. There's Lunch with Lisa and Getting Inside the Right Male Mind with my husband, Benjamin. I also have a brand new website. It is absolutely
Gorgeous.
extraordinary. So please, even if you've visited my website before, go to lisashield.com. All over the website, you will see the button to view my free 45-minute presentation. We have an incredible praise page. We have a whole page dedicated just to the profiles that Benjamin has written, where our clients have written to us praising him for the beautiful profiles that he's written. And it's just an incredible website. It took us over a year to put this together. So please check it out, lisashield.com. Watch my free 45-minute presentation. If you like what you hear, please stay to the end, because that's where you can book a call with me or a member of my team to see how we can help you find the guardian of your soul. You can also like my YouTube channel. You can send us your requests for future topics to podcast@lisashield.com. On the website, you can also find every episode of my podcast right there. If you just want to go through them all and listen, you can see them all there. And I think that's everything.
I think so.
I think I covered it all. Thank you, thank you, thank you for being here. Please tell everyone, tell your husbands, your boyfriends, your girlfriends, your nieces and nephews and fathers and mothers and brothers and sisters about this broadcast. I know that we are saying things in a different way. We hear that from many of you, that our message is unique, that it is from the heart, that it is authentic, that it is genuine. And how else are you going to find a guardian of your soul? Thank you. And please come back and see us again. Bye-bye.